Humanity Matters.
Welcome back here to the Fog of War and Humanity here on HMTV. We're heading into our second episode with Mark Drexler, who's been very actively speaking about his services of his father, Leon Drexler, a gunner on a Sherman tank in the heart of World War II, a Brooklyn kid who answered a call of World War II directly after the moments of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. We spoke about his time in the service, why he went to the armor, maybe some of his earliest tastes of anti-Semitism within the United States Army, and how it kind of gets him into the armor itself. Now, Mark, we spoke about Fort Hood. Where does your dad go after Fort Hood?
Well, it's important to know, as we just spoke, that in 1940, prior to Pearl Harbor, the United States had almost no military, a very small standing army.
17th largest army in the world, somewhere between Portugal and Romania. Not exactly heavyweights in terms of...
and they certainly weren't going to be successful against the German blitzkrieg that was running through Europe in 1940. It started in 1939.
Yeah.
They defeated everybody and anybody.
Very quickly.
Very quickly.
And you got to remember, they were fighting in Spain for 3 years. That was almost like their spring training.
Yes.
They were getting that training down.
Yeah.
And
I can only imagine, and as I told you, I wrote about my father's experience prior and during the war years. I can only imagine what him and his brothers were thinking when they saw the newsreels, because that was part of your experience going to the movies. You didn't have TV in those days, certainly no computers, and they ran the newsreels on all this wars and combat that was ongoing in Europe.
you know where the Germans were very successful in the beginning of the war? Was to show their superiority in terms of how quickly they won. In any sports or competition, a lot of times, even before the first punch is thrown, sometimes the contest is lost, right? When you look at Bradley, what does Bradley say in North Africa? We had to learn how to walk before we could run. And then Sicily kind of showed both the British and the Germans, hey, we're here now. We're getting our feet under us. We're getting our equipment. Like you said, 1940, we weren't prepared for anything. Your dad might have been training with broom handles, in 1941 or 42, and we just had to get our feet under us, our productivity, our resources. And
the Germans, from a war standpoint, a military standpoint, have to be given credit in terms of the creativity and the advanced planning that they devised. Because of their defeat in World War I, their military planners considered that and came up with something that they called the blitzkrieg, which was a combination of Air Force, armor, and infantry. And the concept was to go full force forward and keep on going. And this overwhelmed the Allies, the English and the French. They lost in a matter of weeks.
Sure.
The French had
6 weeks.
The French had stationary, because they were fighting a World War I war. The French
behind the Maginot Line.
The Maginot Line, right?
They get behind them through Belgium. And
were all stationary. Also, the Germans, to my knowledge, were the first ones to utilize paratroopers.
Yeah.
And so they dropped them behind, as you said, the Maginot Line, behind the front lines, and they overwhelmed them. And the end game was at Dunkirk, and the English were lucky to even recover those soldiers. So this is what my father was looking at. I can only imagine what he was thinking, because the world and the media were touting the Germans as supermen. They were not being defeated. And
you have John F. Kennedy's father, Joe Kennedy, Charles Lindbergh, these guys coming out and saying, we have no business fighting these guys. We're not going to win. We're going to lose. They're so far ahead of us. we've been weakened by the Great Depression. And like you said, 1940, okay, who's going to be scared of the United States outside of our Navy?
Sure. They were the America First group. Once, of course, Pearl Harbor happened, they got very quiet.
Yeah.
In fact, Joe Kennedy, you bring him up, so disturbed FDR for a number of different reasons that he was the ambassador to England and he pulled him. And
that was a big deal when he was ambassador.
It was.
Not only because of how wealthy he was and the name, was because he was Catholic.
Yes.
And he was over in England.
Yes.
That was a huge deal.
But even today, I guess today, the ambassadorship to England is the premier of the State Department.
Yeah, it's a special relationship.
And he got pulled.
Yeah.
But getting back to my dad, so he trains, and he goes on the troop ships that people could see on videos or YouTube, these giant troop ships. Now
so
I know
he goes from Texas, right? Where does he ship out of? Does he ship out of the southeast there, or does he go across the country?
Well, my information and my understanding is New York was a major harbor port, so he shipped out there. Now, it looks to me...
Does he go out of Camp Shanks? Because I thought I saw that because that was up almost towards West Point.
Yeah. That is unclear to me. He didn't really discuss that element of his training and
at that time,
experience.
He's like maybe 19 years old, right?
A little older than
20
that,
maybe.
But from the research in this book, the tank battalion was formed in 1942. The Corps. You had 4 companies, A through D. My father was in A company, Alpha Company. And he was Alpha Company's 2nd platoon. So he was not part of the Corps because that was just the Corps to the battalion. So many of the soldiers going over to the European theater shipped out on the East Coast. It looks to me, because I have photos of him in uniform back home, it looks like he got a furlough prior to shipping out over there. So in all likelihood, he arrived with...
He came back east here?
Yes.
And then they might have said to him, all right, you have to report to this area.
Yes.
Right?
So he's on a troop ship, which was no easy matter because you have the German submarines. They were all over the place, including Long Island.
Yeah.
So it was no easy matter. He gets over there somewhere in the early 1944, and as you know, the troops begin training for the invasion in and around that time.
What did they say about the American soldiers? Overpaid. I'm going to say it wrong, but I'll be correct in the 3. Overpaid, oversexed, and over here, right?
That's right.
And England is like a big aircraft carrier in terms of a floating operation for training.
Oh yeah.
Right?
It was incredible.
Yeah.
And there are pictures of planes, fighter planes, in parts that are being driven down the streets.
Yeah.
The Americans and the American forces were spread out all over the place.
The Jeeps, they rolled them off and put the 2 pieces together and put the
Yeah,
pins.
the Jeeps were incredible how they did that. Yeah. Now, training was not very easy, or was it very safe? There was a number of terrible incidences of friendly fire. I had a cousin who informed me about this, and as I was researching it. So the American forces, Eisenhower and his lieutenants, felt that the landing troops should have some experience. So in northern England and in the Scotland area, the coastline is similar to what they were looking at in Normandy. And so they began training. And unfortunately, there was a friendly fire incident. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, where 700 American troops
I've read up on
were killed by American Air Force bombers and I believe artillery that fell short.
Now, this isn't the same accident that I know, but I knew one of the accidents where Americans were killed off the landing craft, and Eisenhower kind of said, all right, get the medics out there and get the grave, detachment, registration, because they're going to have to deal with this in a very short time.
Yeah. Now, I was told by a primary source, my cousin, very nice fellow, he was one of the, he wasn't a sailor, interesting. The landing crafts, those flat bottom crafts, the LCMs, they were driven for the most part by Army military.
Yeah.
And he was in the Army. Now, he told me the story about this friendly fire incident where over 700 troops were killed in a training accident. Can you imagine nowadays if a fraction of that was happened?
The investigations.
Every officer would be drummed out of the service on something like that.
And then that Operation Overlord, which had all the priority, would have been hampered, totally hampered. Everything would have went down to a halt.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, as you know, FDR did not micromanage Eisenhower. Eisenhower was the supreme commander, and he acted as such, and it turned out, obviously, to be the right move.
And where Marshall comes in is Marshall's going to give Eisenhower everything that he needs and the support.
Yes.
Because he saw that with Pershing as being on his staff during World War I.
Yes.
So he saw the importance of that.
It's interesting you bring up, for your audience, George Marshall, who at the time was the chief of the Joint. They didn't have Joint Chiefs, but he was the chief.
Army Chief of Staff.
He was the overall for both theaters of operation. And, FDR wanted Marshall
in command
to be in command of Overlord. And Marshall, interestingly enough, that was the first time he turned down an advancement.
You know what the interesting thing is that? Is that usually the politicians, when they get that high up, they also have an understanding of history. FDR says everybody knows of Grant during the Civil War. Wins the war, right? Appomattox, Lee. Nobody knows of the Army Chief of Staff, and that was Halleck. And he was concerned the same thing was going to happen to Marshall, that his legacy would somehow get tarnished. This great man who was the organizer of victory was going to be on the sidelines.
Well, we're getting a little off topic, but just to put a finer point on it, Marshall chose Eisenhower.
Yeah.
Eisenhower, for your audience information, he was in World War I, but no combat experience.
No, he was at Camp Colt, Pennsylvania.
No combat
experience. War ended
Yeah.
when he was at Fort Dix. He thought he was cursed.
Yeah.
Because he was close with Patton, and he always heard these stories. And then he went on the Battlefield Monuments Commission across France to detail. He was an outstanding writer, but he was always with these officers who were there. And you got to know one thing about Eisenhower. He was a competitor. He was a very good football player.
Yes, he was.
Good baseball player.
Yes.
So in his mind, he thought World War II was going to come to an end, and he was going to lose the chance at being at another war, where he wasn't a warmonger. These guys just wanted to apply their craft, their trade.
And what's interesting, and I know it didn't sit well, didn't go down very well, my understanding is Marshall promoted him 2 ranks to get into that position.
Because he was a lieutenant colonel in 1939, running from MacArthur, who was in the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually said to Patton, if it's all right, I'd like to serve. I think I could do a good job in a tank regiment, under you.
Yeah.
But Eisenhower was the one who saw the full picture,
And I don't think the newer generation understands the enormity of putting together an invasion across a channel.
But it's the selflessness of Marshall to say to FDR,
yes,
wherever you need me, I will go there.
Yes.
Not like today,
no,
where they would be yelling,
looking for notoriety.
Yeah.
That was the first time Marshall turned down a promotion. Real quick, he was offered, I believe, Eisenhower's Secretary of State position, and he turned that down.
Yeah.
Eventually, I think he became Secretary of State. But
Well, he was under Truman. Under Truman, he was.
But he turned that down. But getting back to my dad, so now he's in England for whatever reason, and I don't know why. He wasn't very appreciative or enamored with the English.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
Bad weather, bad food, right?
Well, the people, he constantly called them limeys.
Yeah.
Now, it's not really a derogatory remark. Limey goes way back to the exploration era.
My mom is one of 15 from Sligo, Ireland. I have English cousins, Canadian cousins, right? We're very similar, but we are also very different. We look at things very, very differently. And I think that was part of it. You know,
Right.
I mean, as close as we were, there was some major differences between us. And your dad, Brooklyn kid, armor, he's a tough kid, stands up for himself.
Yes.
Kind of says, I don't know about some of these guys here, right?
And, you know, from January 44, many of the soldiers they're not locked down, but they're restricted to bases and camps, so all over England. It's not just on the coast.
And some quartering homes that they're in. You know?
Yeah, some of them did that. I believe he was in the barracks of whatever area.
Do you know what part of England he was in?
I do not. You know, my dad passed away a number of years ago, but I could tell you that I would love to have sat with him with my current perception and my current interest in questioning him in more detail.
Sure.
The stories I have are both spontaneous and also through my brother, who spoke to him later on in his life.
Now, your brother was in his brother was in the service as well?
Two brothers.
What did they do?
His older brother was not in combat. If I can, he was in the rear. He was in the rear. I don't know if I have a picture of him. He was in the rear, and he was in support. He was in support of the operations.
Okay.
He was in theater.
Was he like supply or something along those lines?
Yeah. I'm not quite sure. He was.
So your grandmother has your dad in uniform,
all
your
three.
uncle
All
in
three.
uniform, and they're both out of the country.
Here's a picture of my uncle, if you can make it out, and he's in front of the Eiffel Tower.
It's great, right?
Yeah, but he
A little different than Coney Island, right?
very different. But he did not see combat. I have a picture. I'll find it later.
And what about the third brother there?
The youngest brother, Marty, was in a training accident at Fort Dix.
Okay.
And the accident was, to show you how dangerous it was, they were using live grenades. And as can happen, one of the recruits dropped the grenade into the pit, and a number of soldiers, including my uncle, were injured.
Wow.
He almost had his arm blown off. And they patched him up, but in World War II, you needed everybody. So he was required to stay in the service, and for the rest of his life, as a young kid, I especially in summers, I saw this enormous scar across his forearm. And only until much later did I find out the details of that scar. As a kid, you're growing up, you see relatives, and whatever blemishes they have, you just accept that.
Yeah, it's your family.
I didn't know initially.
And he didn't say anything about it?
He did not. I found out later on. And recently I had occasion to text his older daughter. On Father's Day, she posted a picture of her and him, and I got back to her. I said, would you like some photos of your dad in uniform? And she said, oh, yeah. So I sent it to her, and then we chatted back and forth about that accident.
Your grandmother, did she have the 3 stars in the window?
So for your audience, as part of morale, the civilian population who had service members would have a small flag.
Yeah.
And my belief is that for every service member, either a husband or a son, it would be a blue star.
Blue star. Yeah.
If you lost a service member,
star,
it would be a gold star. And in the repository of these various artifacts that I found as a kid, I'd like to talk about that in a few moments, was a small flag with 3 blue stars. So
Your
I still have
grandparents
that.
are strong people. Their kids.
Yeah.
That's not an easy thing on the home front.
No. And you know the story of the Sullivan brothers.
Yeah. Yep.
And of course,
All on the same ship.
Of course, and I'm sorry, I don't have the name of the brothers who were killed in the European theater that Saving Private Ryan was based on. Many families sacrificed.
You had a lot of large families years ago, and they all went into service at one time or another.
Yes, and as I pointed out, during World War II, you had 18 million people in the service.
Yeah.
Now, many volunteered, but there was also a draft, and they needed service members. And maybe in a future podcast, when we get into the actual battles.
When your dad's in England and he's training, did he ever say anyone that he came across? Did Eisenhower or any of the big boys come down to see them train? Does he ever mention that he came across any like significant leaders or anything like that?
No. I did ask him that. I said, "Did you meet any generals?" And he did have an affection for Omar Bradley, who was the overall commander of the American, and his my father's battalion, 745th, was part of the 1st Division, but detached, meaning that his tank battalion would be sent wherever was needed to be sent, and not stationary.
Yeah.
He was attached for a goodly number of battles with the 16th Infantry Division, Easy Company.
Now, your dad would look at Bradley, and he had affection towards him. Did he ever come across and meet him or anything like that?
No.
But years down the road, he always thought that Bradley was a good.
Yeah, when I asked him who his general was, I don't even think he ever met the commanding officer of his battalion.
Wow.
Who in the yearbook,
he would have been a lieutenant colonel.
He's a lieutenant colonel, right? Wallace, and the picture, West Pointer, and the picture that they show, he was an architect. So for your audience,
they changed jobs
as you pointed out, this was a citizen soldier army.
They either changed jobs because they were told to, or they felt as though they could do better in another position.
You know,
or like your dad, you're either staying in the clink here for something that was totally unjustified, right?
Yeah.
Or you're going into the armor.
You
have those stories.
You know, the American military, starting from the Revolutionary War, as you well know, were always citizen soldiers, the Minutemen. And World War II was no different. You had people like my father was in the jewelry business. He was a diamond cutter. And the next thing he knows, he's sitting behind a 75-ton tank shooting at people that he doesn't even know, never met, and would easily shoot back at him.
That's the beauty of Saving Private Ryan, because we're all trying to figure out what Captain Miller does. And then he finally says, as they're imploding, because I was an English teacher.
Yes.
I coached baseball from a small town in Pennsylvania. And what does that show you? A couple years before that, he was in a class like us, right?
Well, when I hear stories like that, and you being a teacher as well as myself, it kind of gives me some pride that, look, a teacher was also able to command troops and was able to be engaged in I feel a extremely righteous war, righteous whereas in more modern times, there's a lot of questions. I was in the service during the Vietnam era, and there was
always
a lot
called the war on the Western Front a good war. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I just want to come back for a second to show, if we can. This is my uncle who we're talking about.
okay.
And he came home. This is him, and if you notice, he's at the. This is probably at the very end of the war. He's at the head of an enormous line of German soldiers,
POWs.
POWs.
Right?
Here he is, and he doesn't have the. He has his back to these fellows. He's wearing a sidearm. But what? And I show this to my students. What gets me is here's a young man who's Jewish from Brooklyn, and he's leading a line of these supermen that a couple of years before he saw them conquering all of Europe.
Yeah.
There's something very poignant
And they just
about
subjected people to their will, right? I mean, it's just...
Yeah.
We have a picture on the other side of this wall of an African-American soldier who probably has about 30 soldiers that he's taken prisoner. And there's the look on his face like these guys aren't so bad after all.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing picture. It
The
really is.
African-American experience in World War II, which is not this topic, is exceptional.
Sure.
I believe the 746th Tank Battalion was an all African-American unit.
Well, Jackie Robinson was a commanding officer. He fought a court-martial as his unit was going over to northwestern, Europe.
And people know because they made a movie of the Tuskegee Airmen with the Red Tails, and there's great stories about that. And,
but you know what? Let's come back for a third podcast here on the Fog of War and Humanity on HMTV, and we'll kind of get into maybe some of the shipping out and preparations for Normandy. And then we'll definitely have Mark back here at a later time to go over definitely some of the resources that he's collected over the last several years.
If you enjoyed exploring the information, history, and stories in today's conversation, be sure to check out our other podcasts here on HMTV. Please subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations.
Humanity Man.